Welcome to episode 9 of the Cals Report, your trusted source for leadership insights and candid conversations shaping the future of college athletics. I'm Will Reese, co-founder of Next Level Sports and director of Cal since 2011. In our big interview, Ryan Bradley sits down with one of the most thoughtful and dynamic leaders in college sports, University of Arizona Vice President and Director of Athletics Desiree Reed-Francois. With the House settlement looming, Arizona's recent transition to the Big 12, and a multi-million-dollar budget turnaround already in progress, Desiree opens up about what it takes to lead through disruption. From building relationships and realigning resources to redefining success, her story is a powerful example of values-based, future-focused leadership. Then, in the lobby, we join George Mason's Ashton Henderson, Tennessee's Ryan Alpert, and Oklahoma's Marcus Bowman for an unfiltered, peer-to-peer discussion. From revenue generation and sport oversight to pressure-tested decision-making, this is the conversation happening in real time on campuses across the country. They cover what keeps them up at night and what keeps them going. From big-picture strategy to everyday leadership grit, Episode 9 delivers the kind of perspective Cals is known for. Coming up next, Ryan Bradley kicks off our big interview with Desiree Reed-Francois, right here on the Cals Report, where the conversation continues long after the event ends. Hey, Will Reese here. Just wanted to jump on real quick and tell you about a couple of big events coming up for our Cals community. First up, Cals One Day is happening Wednesday, June 18th in Washington, D.C. at George Washington University. We've got a great group of athletics departments from the region already signed up, and we're almost full. So if you're interested in bringing a group from your department, head over to adsymposium.us, click on the Cals One Day tab, and get registered today. Then, coming this fall, registration opens in early June for our 15th annual Cals, taking place October 5th through 7th in Columbus, Ohio. As always, space is limited and attendance is by invitation, so be sure to reserve your spot early. For all the details, visit adsymposium.us and keep an eye on our social media channels and your inbox for registration updates. We've got a great pod for you today. Thanks again for listening, and let's get to it.
It's time now for the big interview here on the Cals Report podcast. I'm Ryan Bradley, and I'm pleased to be joined this month by the Vice President and Director of Athletics at the University of Arizona, Desiree Reed-Francois. Desiree, how are things in Tucson?
Oh, it's beautiful. I'm looking outside my window right now, and the sun is shining, and it is a gorgeous day out here in Tucson, Arizona.
Awesome. Well, I want to dive into all that's been transpiring during your tenure at Arizona so far. You just recently completed your first full academic year there in Tucson. Tell us a little bit about the progress you've made and your vision for what Arizona athletics can be moving forward.
Well, I'm a proud 1997 College of Law graduate, and I reference that year not to underscore how old I am, but actually it was a really good year in Arizona sports history. We won a national championship in softball. We won a national championship in men's basketball. And so that's the expectation at a place like the University of Arizona. Comprehensive excellence, whether that is on the court, in the swimming pool, on the field, but it's also an opportunity for us to galvanize our community while running a really solid business. This year has been a great one. No matter what, we all have metrics and we all have scoreboards, but in the end, this is a people business. And I'm really excited to see the people come together as a team this year. And that's what I'm looking forward to into the future. But that's also a source of pride, is seeing people work together and achieve more than they ever thought possible.
I want to go back to the early days of your time as the athletic director and the onboarding process there in Tucson. What did those first few months look like for you in terms of how you spent your time and how you assessed what was working and perhaps what needed to change?
Certainly. Well, I've only been here 14 months, so I can't say I've got it all figured out. We're definitely a work in progress. But whenever I go, whether it was at UNLV or at Missouri or now here at the University of Arizona, I take a pretty simple approach. And you're doing a lot of listening, doing a lot of assessing, just so that you can learn and identify what are those challenges and how can you help move the organization forward. we had a very public challenge in that we had about a $34 million budget deficit. And we were able to, in that first quarter that I was here. So high priority for me is I had to build some stability. We had to stabilize the budget. We had to provide stability within the organization. We had change not only in the athletic director chair, but also on campus my first quarter, and that our president left, the president that recruited me and hired me. And then, so I was fortunate enough to be a part of the search committee to hire President Garamella, who is fantastic, and really privileged to work for him. But there was a lot of change, not only on our campus, but also nationally. We were joining a new conference in the Big 12. We were, longtime Pac-12 members, and then now all of a sudden we are going to different parts of the country. So there was that change. And then, as you know, there's the House settlement. So I had two parallel tracks. The one, my first year, where I'm stabilizing the budget, getting to know the people, building that foundation for future success. Then the second parallel track is getting us prepared not only for the Big 12, but also for the House settlement. That's an imperative that we have to participate in so that we can continue to provide not only the opportunities for our student athletes, but the championship opportunities for our community. The University of Arizona represents $266 million in economic annual impact here in Southern Arizona. We have a responsibility to this community to make sure that we participate at the highest level. So as part of that assessment process, and I think I copied it from Whit Babcock, who I think copied it from Jim Phillips. And maybe Mike Alden was in there too, but we use a SWOT form. I did it at Vegas. I did it at Mizzou, and then I did it here. We have every staff member fill it out, and then I meet with every individual staff member throughout this first year to really go over their form. We talk about those challenges that they see on the horizon, how we can make an impact so that we can move the organization forward.
You mentioned being hired by one president and then almost immediately going to work for another one. Talk to us a little bit about building relationships, building trust, and forming alignment with a president. How do you go about that, and how important is that to the overall success of your leadership in the athletic department you're leading?
It's critical. But it all starts with transparency. It starts with listening and adaptation. So Bobby was not a president that wanted to have weekly meetings or biweekly meetings, et cetera. Bobby was one that you would just pick up the phone. And I was really new with Bobby too. He hired me in, I guess, March of 24. And so I was adjusting to his style. And as the athletic director, that's our responsibility. We have to adjust to our boss's style and our board's style and understand the parameters with which we work. And then coming in, President Garamella, I had to figure out after we went through the search committee, and being on that search committee gave me a little bit of a vantage into what he was like on the front end. And so that really helped accelerate our relationship. But just like any good relationship, you have to listen a lot more. You have to observe, and you have to figure out kind of what is this president's style and how can I adapt to his or her style so that we can move the organization forward. I'm really fortunate in that the value alignment, both with with President Robbins and with President Garamella, is there, because that's critical for the success of any leader and any staff member.
You mentioned a moment ago you were a law student at Arizona during what some would call the glory days of Arizona athletics. What are your expectations for Arizona athletics moving forward, and how will you measure success and whether or not you're living up to those expectations, let's say 3 or 5 years down the road?
Absolutely. We all have scoreboards. So our mission is very simple. We're graduating leaders, winning championships, and galvanizing our community. Under each one of those pillars, we have key performance indicators. I want our coaches to look at our administration. And if our coaches are judged on their scoreboards, we as administrators need to be judged on our respective scoreboards and our KPIs. So we just went through a strategic planning process, and we have put together our Bear Down Blueprint, which is our roadmap for how we're going to continue to succeed. You mentioned the golden era. Well, I think golden era is nostalgic, but I want to look at kind of the continuous platinum era, where we are continuing to win championship, to challenge for championships. And each program is on a little bit of a different path, and they're all resourced a little bit differently. And they may have a first-year head coach or a fourth-year head coach or whatever a historical tradition or whatever the case may be. So you judge them each on their respective places in their journey. And then that way I just finished a performance conversation with one of our head coaches. And I always ask our coaches, what is it? How can I help you? What is it that you need for your program to win those championships, to graduate those leaders? And so that we can galvanize our community together. And whenever you're working with head coaches, it truly is a partnership. And I'm very fortunate to work with some great ones. And I've worked with some incredible ones throughout my tenure as well. So I think if you approach it like a partnership, recognize that you don't have all the answers, that you need to listen and respect their expertise, and then create that environment for your coaches to be successful.
We're recording this conversation in late May. I think it's important to timestamp that. We're still in a period of fluidity and unprecedented change. As we speak, it seems like the House ruling from Judge Wilkin is imminent. How are you preparing Arizona to navigate this new landscape? What do you think it's going to take for athletic departments to remain sustainable and yet focused on your student athletes and your core mission in the years ahead?
Great question. First, when we were putting together our plan for House, we had to make the first decision, are we going to participate? And if so, at what level? And then we had to come up with guiding principles. And ours were very simple. We will be fair, we will be incredibly competitive, and we will be fiscally responsible. And then we had to figure out a way to logically disperse that revenue. We had to figure out how are we going to get the revenue. And so we came up with a myriad of different opportunities, whether it's naming rights, and we have I think there's 7 different areas where we both cut and we added to get to that 20.5. And then we came up with our protocol with how we were going to disperse it. And then we went and we had a double check and we compared with, what are some of the industry norms in a space where we don't have industry norms. So you're doing the best you can. And that's why the relationships you have in this business are critical, because you have to be able to call up your colleagues and figure out hey, tell me about what are you doing here? How are you going to approach this? And do a lot of listening, a lot of information sharing. Not that we are, and I have the benefit of being a part of the implementation committee. And so we meet twice a week, sometimes for 2 hours during each meeting. And so I'm able to really understand the theory and help my colleagues on this committee really develop what the protocol and the rules are. And that in turn will also help the University of Arizona. So once we made that decision, had our plan in place, then we had to execute. We hired an associate athletic director for contract management, and Bud Sasser was a former SEC, all SEC wide receiver at the University of Missouri. He went to law school, and then he worked with the collective at Mizzou. And so he had a really interesting vantage. And so his job is to work with our general counsel's office and our respective sports programs and help negotiate or implement those contracts. And so there is a lot that we don't know. And there is a lot that we are developing on the fly. But what I do know is that when the House settlement, hopefully it will be implemented very soon. But once it is, we will have progress. It is not going to be perfect, though. I was just talking to my coaches about this. It will be progress over perfection, and that's okay. And we will adjust as we need to.
I get the privilege of talking to athletic directors like you on this podcast every month. And it seems like every one of them shares how if you told me the things that I would be working on, the problems we would be trying to solve today, that we'd be working on this 5 years ago, I don't think I would have even, been able to comprehend how the job and the challenges have evolved. And yet there's this idea that from these complex problems comes great opportunities, comes innovation. Talk a little bit about how this evolution of college athletics and some of the problems that you've been forced to look at and address and innovate have led to some great outcomes and some unique opportunities for you and for your athletic department?
Well, first of all, you started going down on your question on where I thought you were going to go, and that people aren't staying in this industry. I would just really encourage, if there are people who are relatively new in this industry and are on the beginning of their career journeys, to stay with it. We need talented people in this industry. We may have challenges and with house and whatever the litigation we have, and there are always going to be challenges. But anything worthwhile is worth doing, and this is worth doing. I would imagine many of the people in your audience are products of the student-athlete experience, and they understand how important that student-athlete experience was to them. And so I would just encourage them not to lose sight of that. Next to the GI Bill, I think that college athletics has provided more opportunities than any other. College scholarships have provided more opportunities than any other endeavor, and it really is an important one. So yes, there are challenges, but we will figure it out, because that's what we do, and we'll move forward. And it is the most transformational time in college sports history. But you know what? We've been through the pandemic. We have 504 young people on our campus. They all have stories. They all have hopes. They all have dreams. They all have challenges. And we owe it to not only my 504 here at the University of Arizona, but the millions of young people who play sports. We owe it to them to figure this out and to move forward in a very values-based and comprehensive way. And we will.
That's great.
So I forgot what your whole question was. I'm so sorry. I went on a tangent and I got rolling.
No, that was a great perspective. With that perspective, wanted to get your thoughts on how this transformational time in college athletics has forced you to innovate. It's forced you to address problems that otherwise perhaps, would have stayed on the back burner, and how you and your staff have approached that and maybe embraced these problems as opportunities and seen positive outcomes for you, for your student athletes, for your university.
We probably would have gotten there at some point, but I think the rate of change has just accelerated like in no time in history that we've ever seen. For example, we're doing a naming rights deal right now that we're working on, and I think this is not a novel concept. Many of us have done naming rights deals. It's just there's an openness now because of the imperative to look for resources in places that we've never had before. And so I tell our staff sometimes when it feels hard, and I borrowed this line the other day from someone, and I'm very full and abundant today. And I think it was Patty Phillips. And yes, we may have our plates very full and abundant, but we're not curing cancer. And in the end, like what we do, we are helping young people achieve their hopes and their dreams. And don't lose sight of that. But yes, we're going to look at naming rights. We're going to look at on-field suites. We decided at the University of Arizona, instead of going with our multimedia rights and outsourcing it, we brought it in-house. And we created a 501c3 and an LLC. And we wanted the flexibility to be able to adjust quickly. And we also recognized, I think, that 84% of our corporate sponsors were local, and we wanted to try it ourselves. And I think we're at 108% of where we anticipated. So it is a heavy lift, and it is not for everybody, and it is not in any way to devalue what our multimedia rights partners do. It's just for our campus that gave us a little more flexibility and an opportunity to align all of our profit centers together, so that there weren't these separations between development and corporate philanthropy or corporate development, corporate partnerships. And so that's been really productive for us. We're also really looking at what we're doing in the licensing space. We're looking at what kind of collaborations can we use and can we create that we hadn't thought of before. And some of my head coaches have given us some great ideas that we hadn't thought of. Sometimes when you're so deep in the weeds of how are we going to raise more money? How are we going to raise more money? You forget how much talent you have in your respective department that you need to tap into. And that's been a wonderful opportunity for us.
I want to tap into your decision-making process a little bit. With so much changing so quickly, I imagine you're having to make a lot of important decisions every week, if not every day. What does that decision-making process look like for you in terms of ensuring that you're gathering enough information to make the right decisions while also moving with speed to make sure that you and your team stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, great question. The first thing, and I think we really learned this through the pandemic, you have to assess as the leader, you have to assess what type of problem it is. Is it one that you can go and you can build consensus and you can really spend some time and create buy-in? Or is it one that you're going to, is it an immediate problem that you just need to consult and decide and then move forward all collaboratively, clearly communicate so first triage it, and then any kind of problem that I have or challenge, I take a 4-prong approach. You probably weren't expecting that I would be this nerdy, but that's okay. So what I do is I assess it, is the first thing. Like after I triage what kind of problem it is, then assess it, design the optimal solution, implement and manage. I mean, again, not rocket science, but I like to have a process for almost everything we do. And so that way we don't skip steps. And by the way, I read this really great book. I highly recommend it. It's called The Checklist Manifesto. Have you read it?
I have not.
Fantastic book. One of my board members gave it to me, and I gave it to all of our leadership team. But it essentially says, what can you, and it takes several different industries, and it looks, how can you make things more efficient through the use of checklists? And it's so simple, but it's really brilliant. I'd highly recommend.
I love a good checklist, so I'm going to have to check for sure. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk to you about your hiring philosophy, and in terms of what are the core values, whether we're talking about hiring coaches or hiring a staff. What are those core values, and have they evolved or changed at all given some of the skill sets that are necessary with the environment and the problems we're trying to solve today?
So my personal core values are integrity, service, honor, excellence. And I think they have probably evolved over time in that I remember Dutch Bachman asking us when I was just coming up back when we had D1A, and he said, make sure you know your core values. And I remember thinking, what is he talking about? And then sure enough, when I was the interim athletic director at the University of Cincinnati, I was faced with a really significant issue my first day on the job, and Whit had already left to Virginia Tech. And I just remember thinking about Dutch Bachman and those core values. And he went back to it, and it's almost like this wonderful checklist of making sure that you are abiding by kind of your North Star. So in terms of, core values are critical. And I love that you asked that question. What was the second part?
What are the core values you're looking for, the non-negotiables when you're hiring staff, whether it be a senior staffer or a head coach?
Sure. Whenever we're hiring staff, we talk about high, low, high character. And for us, character is defined as selfless, smart, hardworking. That's what we look for, because we got to be a team. So high character, low ego. Like, we don't have time for a bunch of nonsense. I don't have time for a bunch of drama. And no one is ever going to be bigger than the program. I learned that from watching Coach Summit and watching Coach Beamer. And both of those incredible leaders personify that. No one is bigger than the program. So low ego, and then high outcome and energy. I'm a big energy person, and I like people who are going to bring energy. If I have to constantly be pulling you forward, I'd much rather put the reins on someone than have to kick them in the pants to keep making them go. That's a horrible analogy. I need to find a better one. But yeah, high, low, high. And then whenever it comes, and so that doesn't matter what position it is, if it's an assistant development director, if it's a head football coach, if it's a defensive coordinator, high, low, high. And then the second piece, whenever I'm hiring a head coach, And I'm in the middle of a track search right now. There's 10 characteristics that we go through, and those have continued to evolve over time. And the most recent one I've added about 2 years ago was the ability to thrive in the modern era of college athletics. This is a different space and different skill. What works today or what worked 10 years ago doesn't necessarily work today. And you have to be able to adapt. And I think this modern era, it is a different skill set than what we've seen in my past.
If I can, I'd love to have you kind of walk through that process for hiring in application or a case study. Let's use the Dennis Gates hire at the University of Missouri a few years ago as an example, since we both have that common background in Columbia. Walk us through the process of the decision that a change needed to be made at the top, and then the process from there to introducing Dennis Gates as your head coach, and kind of gives an insight to how you apply that process to a specific scenario where the stakes are really high, i.e. hiring a men's basketball coach in the SEC.
Certainly. So this year when we hired Dennis, first of all, it was a remarkably difficult, probably the hardest professional decision I've ever made, was to make the transition with Coach Conzo Martin. Conzo Martin is a great man, high integrity. He is someone, quite frankly, I have a 21-year-old son, Jackson, and I remember that I have a picture of Jackson and Conzo Martin holding hands when Jackson was about 4 and walking along the beach. I think we were at the Maui Invitational, and I took a picture of them from behind. It was just such a beautiful moment, and Conzo just cares about students. And Jackson, my son, had committed to play basketball at the University of Missouri under Coach Martin. And then fast forward, I started as the athletic director before Jackson, like when Jackson was he committed in his junior year. And then I started, and he spent his whole senior year in Las Vegas with my husband. And then while I was in Columbia. So I was out in Columbia, and I just felt that the trajectory of the basketball program wasn't where it needed to be. So we made the difficult decision. We communicated it with Coach Martin. I communicated it with them, and we had been talking throughout the year. So it wasn't a surprise. And then there were 5 other openings in the Southeastern Conference that year. So 6 total. So it was a very competitive landscape. I tend to go relatively quickly, and I had been doing research throughout that year when we started realizing this was probably going to go south. But before we went out in the marketplace, I think it's critically important that you do preparation on the front end. Preparation not only before you even get to the who might be available, preparation and assess what it is that your school needs at that moment in time. And then once you've identified those characteristics, then you can start looking at as to who is available, who fits your school, and importantly, who is going to say yes. What are the parameters with which you are going out in the marketplace? Each school has a different set of parameters in terms of who has decision-making authority, who needs to be involved in the decision. And so knowing that on the front end and being very clear what those expectations are, what those limitations, what those opportunities are with all of your key stakeholders is critically important. And that will be the determinant of your success in that hire, because you want to have not only a great search process, but you want a great runway for your head coach to come in and be embraced by their community so that he or she has that opportunity just to fly. So build as long of a runway as possible, and you do that with the front end preparation work. And then you go get aggressive in the marketplace. And I remember I offered Dennis the job. I interviewed some coaches via Zoom, but he was the only one that I offered the job to. And I had seen him. I had watched a lot of tape, a lot of interviews. It's amazing what you can do now with YouTube. And I had talked to a lot of people that knew him, a lot of really random connection points. And so then I go and I fly out to Cleveland. offer him the job. I flew commercial. And then I remember, like I said, there were 5 other schools in the marketplace, and I knew several were talking to him. And then my flight got delayed, and I didn't want it. And so I was talking with his agent, and I'm like, I swear I am not like leveraging. I'm not trying to play games. I am just stuck. And I even went so far as took a picture of the flight information, and I sent it to Will Reese, who's wonderful. And the good thing is I had a trusting relationship with Will Reese already, and he knew how much I wanted Dennis. And so I flew out on Friday, offered him the job. His wonderful wife, Jocelyn, and their family, they were waiting for Jocelyn to drive in from Columbus, Ohio. So she gets there, and we wanted her to be a part. And then it was just a beautiful moment. And then our board was not going to meet until Tuesday. And for the contract to be fully valid, the board needed to approve it. So I stayed in Cleveland, Ohio, and I practically moved into with the Gateses. And I was not going to leave him until I got him on the airplane, both he and Jocelyn and their beautiful family. So the only time I left Cleveland, Ohio was to drive over to Detroit to go see Keegan O'Toole, who was a wrestler, win the national championship. And then I drove right back and went and checked in and say, okay, I'm going to hold off my other colleagues in the Southeastern Conference because I'm going to get you on that airplane. And we did. And Dennis Gates is a man of great character, has done a phenomenal job. And I am so excited for him to cut down nets and hang up banners and be invited to his student athletes' weddings.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. When you get to that last part and you're talking about, all right, we've got an agreement in principle, but we've got to get to Tuesday when the board has communications guy, my anxiety levels start to rise during that. We've all been there. I want to ask you about what your communication strategy looks like in the midst of such an intense and heavily reported on, scrutinized coaching search like that one. How do you maintain confidentiality while also keeping the right people informed and bought into your process along the way?
Well, we have to be clear on the front end that people will be putting things in the marketplace and not always for the most altruistic reasons, right? People may be using your search to leverage. They may leverage whether it is a job that they currently have, that they want, or even to try and get you to interview them, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to recognize that's going to happen. You can't stop every social media rumor or everybody putting out whatever they're going to put out. It is what it is. But when it starts to get a life of its own, that's when I am in a search, I do. I lock in, and my house might be burning down and I will not notice it because I'm so focused on that. It's a really annoying trait that I have. So that's why you have to have a really good communications person who is monitoring that. And then will tell you, hey, this is getting some legs. Do you want me to address it? I have gone so far, not in a recent search, as a matter of fact, where I saw that, again, goes back to the power and the importance of relationships, where I saw that a coach's a sitting colleague of mine, his coach was mentioned in a search that I was doing, and I had no interest in that coach. And so I've called that athletic director and said, hey, by the way, I've seen your coach's name. I want you to know I am not interviewing your coach. And if I do, I will call you and let you know. So open lines of communication, a recognition that it is going to happen. People are going to put out false information. And then you have to have a great communications person by your side to let you know when it is, because you can't monitor the whole thing. You just can't. And then people will leak things because whatever the case may be, sometimes they're just mad that you weren't interested in them. And sometimes anyway, there's people with not always pure motives that put things out there, and you have to decide whether or not you want to address it or not.
I want to talk a little bit about representation. There are currently 10 female athletic directors in the FBS, 6 in power conferences. As someone who has broken through at the highest level, how do you assess the current landscape and pipeline for women in these roles? And what do you think are some of the keys to growing that number in the years ahead?
Well, there are incredibly talented women, both in the pipeline coming up and serving as colleagues of mine. They are just great, great people who need opportunities. And I recognize that it is, and I think probably when I used to get asked the question about what's it like to be a female athletic director, and I remember I used to give a smart aleck answer at UNLV. I did, and I would say, well, I don't know how to be a man, so how about I just be a leader? And then I got to Missouri, and it was my first or second day on the job. I was speaking with a women's soccer program, and a young lady, she came up to me, and she got kind of emotional. And I just said, I thought, goodness gracious. And sometimes I don't always have word economy, which is annoying. And I thought, what did I say? And I asked her, and I said, have I said something to offend you? And she said, no, I just never thought like a person like me could do what you do. And she was Mexican as well. And I just thought, I need to be a lot more thoughtful when I get asked that question, because it maybe not because I am special, but I'm just a regular person like everybody else. But maybe I can provide context. And I remember reading Justice Sotomayor's book, and she talked about the importance of context. And I thought, okay, I am always going to work really, really hard. I'm not going to turn down opportunities to speak to groups if I can in any way make it, because maybe by the context that I provide, it paints a picture of what someone else could think about. So my hope is that my future granddaughter is not asked, what is it like to be a female CEO? She's asked, what is it like to be a great CEO? And you have to do great work. Like, make no mistake about it. We have a responsibility to not only our 504 student athletes, but we have to do great work because we have a responsibility to keep that door open and bring others along with us.
It's really good. So who would you say are some of the most influential mentors in your career journey, and how has their guidance shaped the way that you mentor others?
My mother first. She taught me the importance of she painted a picture of being a strong leader. My dad and my grandfather taught me my love of learning. And my grandfather, he was 101 when he passed away, and he spoke 23 languages, played tennis every day until 2 weeks before he passed away. And that love of learning I definitely have from my father and my grandfather. My brother every day paints a picture of resiliency and strength. And then from a professional standpoint, Jeremy Foley taught me the obsession with details, and that you can be comprehensively excellent. And Debbie Yao after my mother passed away, Debbie has become like a substitute mother for me. And she's just an incredible inspiration. And like I said, she painted a picture for me of what I could do.
You mentioned your brother. Would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit of that story and the impact that he's had on your life?
Certainly. So I am not a great athlete. I just work really hard, but I'm naturally remarkably uncoordinated. My younger brother was a great athlete, and he, any sport he could pick up, and it was beautiful at it. Great linebacker, played, this was in 1992. He would have gone off to a 4-year college and played college football, but was a Prop 48 back then because he was a little wild and had bad grades. So he went to Chabot Junior College in Hayward, California. And my first year in law school, I was sitting in section 10 at the Arizona Stadium, September 10th of 1994. And Roman was going for the record of the most tackles in the state of California in a game. He, like I said, he was a linebacker. And he was tackling the running back. They were falling to the ground. And as they were falling, someone just crashed into his neck, into his helmet. And at that moment, snapped his neck and he became a quadriplegic. So it was obviously incredibly challenging for our family. It was our faith. It was our strong family unit. It was also football, provided a common language for us to talk about when things were a little just too hard and too raw. And then what I didn't realize at the time, but it's like you feel helpless. You want to fix your brother, your loved one so badly, but you can't. And so you do what you can. But I think that shaped my career more than I realized at the time. And that I dedicated my life to making sure that my student athletes have the resources that they need so they can achieve their hopes and their dreams, because I couldn't do that for Roman. So I guess that's my why.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Professional development opportunities like CALS continue to grow in importance as this crazy landscape evolves. You mentioned Will Reese earlier, the founder of CALS. From your perspective, what do events like CALS play in preparing the next generation of leaders?
CALS is so important. I love CALS. And I'm always very privileged and humbled when I'm asked to speak at CALS. And I love it selfishly because it forces me to think a little bit differently. Whenever you're going to teach something, you have to get a little bit better. But it also allows me to see the incredible talent coming up. And there is so much talent out there. It makes me so proud. But then I also love the opportunity to communicate with my colleagues and with people coming up that pipeline and learn from them. And that's what CALS can do. It allows you to connect with people and develop authentic relationships that will serve you so incredibly well. Like we've talked about how challenging this industry is, and it is. But it's the relationships that sustain us. It's the relationships that inspire us. So going to CALS enables you to forge those important relationships. Maybe you'll pick up a nugget or two from a speaker, or maybe someone will paint a picture for you. But CALS is critically important, and it's done. There's a lot of professional development opportunities out there that are great, but CALS is very much like Will Reese, and it has a true heart.
That's great. Sticking with the personal professional development theme, what kinds of habits do you incorporate in your daily routine that help keep you grounded and healthy as a leader?
Oh boy. I need to take my own medicine. Well, I wake up at 4 a.m., which again, I'm coming across super nerdy, I know. But I do. I wake up at 4 a.m. I like to pray. I like to meditate. And then I have a running group that I go running with at 5, and I run 5 to 6. And that is from like 4 to 6. That centers me. It gives me some peace, and it clears my mind, and it allows me to attack the day. So that's a special time for me, and I'm just very thankful that I have it. And so that's what I tend to do. And then I'm forcing myself to go. I love to scuba dive. And I am going to go on usually 4th of July week is that 1 week in college athletics where football's gone, men's basketball, women's basketball, everybody's gone, and your staff can kind of breathe. It's usually just that week. So of course, the settlement will, if it goes into effect, it will start July 1st. So my husband was like, you got to not like really July 1st. But anyway, I'm going to go scuba diving, and that is one place my phone doesn't work. All I do is I just get absorbed, and I cannot wait to go see whale sharks this year.
I think that's the secret ingredient to a great vacation these days is going somewhere where your phone doesn't work. Doesn't matter where it is. If you could be off the grid, then that's probably the right place to be, at least for a short while. All right, we're about out of time. I do want to ask you one more question. A lot of our CALS audience are those young athletic administrators just starting their career or maybe midway through their career journey, hoping and aspiring to have a role like yours one day. Thinking about them, but also thinking about your younger self. If you could go back and give, let's say, 25-year-old Desiree some early career advice, what would it be, and what kind of perspective would you want her to have that you've learned from your time in the industry?
Relationships are key, and I've talked about it earlier, but I mean it authentically. Get to know people genuinely, not just standing in and passing out business cards or sending out texts. Like, care more about people when you don't need them. And a relationship is just that. It's two ways. When someone is going through something hard with their family, and maybe their dad just had a heart attack, or maybe their son has cancer, write them a note, because you never know in those little moments. I know from speaking from experience, with my brother's accident, or when my mother passed away, like, those little notes really matter. So maybe look out for people just a little bit more, even when it's not convenient. The second thing I would say is do excellent work. You have to. Our student athletes deserve that. Our communities need that. And you will feel so much more confident when you know, and you will develop your authentic voice when you know you have given absolutely everything that you have, and you've done your absolute best. That's where the true confidence comes from. And then the third thing I would say is, be courageous. This is a great industry, but it's a competitive one. And, it takes a little bit of courage and a little bit of audacity. So be bold, be courageous, and get to know people.
I think that's a great place to end it. Desiree, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your candor in this conversation, and for your continued investment in cows and the cows community. We appreciate all you do.
Welcome to the Cows edition in terms of our lobby segment here. I'm grateful to have two esteemed colleagues who I respect the heck out of with us today. My name is Ashton Henderson. I serve as the Deputy Athletics Director for Championship Resources and Culture. I'm grateful to have two sons of the Palmetto State with me today, particularly by way of Columbia, South Carolina. Here, I know Mayor Rickerman is smiling from ear to ear, and when he tunes into this, he can give you some NIL deals from the city himself personally. But we're joined by Ryan Alpert. He's a senior deputy chief revenue officer at the University of Tennessee. When we have Marcus Bowman, who serves as the deputy AD for business development and revenue generation at the University of Oklahoma. Welcome, brothers. Welcome. Glad you both are here with me.
Excited to be here. I apologize if you can hear the alarm in the background. When anybody hits the transfer portal at Tennessee, we do an all facility fire alarm so we can go figure it out.
Y'all must be hitting that alarm a lot these days, or we all are probably.
No question, gentlemen. Grateful to have you both. What Ryan didn't tell the listeners, you just had a faculty senate meeting, so that's why the alarm's going off. Truly.
They're coming after me.
No doubt. But no, we're just going to have a real conversation around some topics, which I'm really excited about. But before we jump into it, I know both of you being from Columbia, South Carolina, I got to know, what's your favorite restaurant? Marcus, we'll start with you. Then Ryan, come on the back end. We'll go from there.
Man, it's great being with you guys as well. And I'm a simple guy. It's amazing, though. I haven't been in Columbia or lived in Columbia for over 20 years now, which is just crazy. But one of my favorite spots that I used to go to was Rush's. I don't know if they still have them there, but I used to be a hot dog basket guy, no slaw, extra fries. So you can never really go wrong with a good Rush's joint.
Awesome. Rushes, like Rushes?
Like Rushes.
Okay,
like Rushes,
about. He knows what I'm talking about.
All right.
Cool.
My wife, every time we go through there, whether we're going home this weekend to baptize our second child, and she will make sure we get a Rush's basket and a milkshake without question. I'd say Bojangles. I mean, like a chicken biscuit. Man, I go on the road, when we get back to South Carolina or some, now they've kind of expanded to different spots, but back in the day, that was my go-to spot. Their honey mustard is to die for.
Awesome, gents. I appreciate it. I spent some time in the upstate myself, in the Palmetto State. We'll keep it PG. I was at Clemson. but we'll keep that for another time. But with that being said, again, the lobby segment of the Cals Report, jumping right in to what we're here to discuss and talk about, just real conversations. First thing, obviously, Ryan, we'll start with you. I know a Rocky Top. What is one thing that's being kind of socialized right now on your campus? And Marcus, you can answer that same question after Ryan finishes up. But just one thing, what's everyone talking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the easy way to say is, house, what's going on with the house case and revenue share, and how does that impact our campus? How does that impact, our overall athletic department? I'd say that's number one. And then secondly, it's a full campus system conversation. Unique to us is this entertainment district. How does it integrate with campus? What are the financial metrics of it? What will, the faculty senate I just heard from, what type of meeting spaces will faculty have in there? Our fans want to know how they're going to access condos. But every time we jump on a Zoom or a meeting about it, there's representation from more offices than I ever anticipated. And I'd say it's a very common conversation, which is sometimes a relief, as challenging as the problems are with that project, to not have to talk about house or revenue share or that implementation. And so I enjoy the bifurcating those two topics quite a bit.
What's ironic is a lot of the same stuff going on here at OU. Obviously, we're all share the same underlying big topic of what's going on with the house. And I could talk a little bit more about that, but we're also embarking on an entertainment district of our own here in Norman, which we're very, very excited about. We're probably a little bit behind where Tennessee is, but we feel great about where we are and kind of where we're heading. I think as it relates to the house, I think just thinking about, kind of how the new future of college athletics is going to look and how you position your teams in these new worlds to be successful. Obviously, our industry is looking a lot different. It's changing rapidly. We're all just trying to keep up, and you're trying to find that right balance of not trying to react too quickly, but still being proactive, but not being too proactive where you got to end up reversing a lot of things back. So finding that balance has just been an extreme challenge, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, you're not alone, gents. I feel kind of the same thing. Obviously, here in Michigan State, really everything you're into, I think the best thing is, like you said, Ryan, having a breath of fresh air to step outside the house and talk about other things that are going on and pertinent on campus. And to Marcus, your point, kind of not where Tennessee is, but socializing conversations around what do revenue streams and additional streams look like on our campus. So it's good to know, even in the SEC, we got Big Ten problems too. We're all in the same boat, which is great. But with that being said, too, really thinking about the places we've been. I looked at you both's career paths and just unbelievable journeys for both of you in different institutions. One thing I admire about you both is in terms of what you've been able to do with serving the communities and all the places you've been and how you've tied that back into the larger scope of the plan and infrastructure what you're building at both institutions, which is really cool. But one of the things that I want to hear from both of you, and I'll dovetail and join in, is as it relates to kind of your leadership principles. Speaking of how they remain consistent regardless of the institution level and or how they've evolved or where they are. So, Marcus, you want to start us off there?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think there's a lot of great leadership principles out there. For me, boils down to a few things. I think the best leaders are the ones that start with self-awareness, and have a high level of self-awareness and kind of where they're strong, maybe where some things that they're not as strong at, and being able to surround yourself with great people that can help you, that dovetails off of that self-awareness. And then the second thing, and this was one of the things that I heard, maybe probably well over a decade ago from a chancellor that I work for. He mentioned that the best leaders have aptitude and latitude. And what I meant by aptitude is, do you have the requisite skill set to be able to do a job, right? So if you're hiring a coach, do they understand X's and O's? Do they understand recruiting? Do they understand the new world? And then latitude, like, do people give you the autonomy and the freedom to lead? Are they willing to follow you, right? Because there are some leaders that are great at one or the other, right? They may have all the requisite skill sets, but they don't actually have that ability to lead, or people aren't willing to follow them. And you have some people that maybe don't have like the great skill sets, but they can talk their way into anything. And so I think the best leaders are somebody that has that combination of both. But to me, it still starts with a high level of self-awareness.
Yeah, and I would echo. I love the way you said that, but and I would say one of the things that I've tried to continue to get better at, and I think learning from other leaders. I think a friend and mentor, Ren Baker, once told me, he was actually a basketball coach at the time, and he was running a practice, and somebody he worked with before, and he was the head coach at Rogers State, and was running this practice, and somebody pulled him over to the side at the end of that practice and said, like, Ren, why are you acting like that on the court? And he's like, well, that's how Eddie Sutton did it. And he was like, and Eddie was really successful. So if I do everything that Eddie does, I can be really successful as a leader and as a coach. And he's like, well, the thing is, the difference is that you're not Eddie Sutton. But there are bits and pieces of Eddie, of how he runs a practice or the way he communicates with his guys or things he does coming out of a timeout that you can pick up. And I think for me, I hope that I have picked up a little bit of a little bit of something from all the leaders that I've been a part of. And I think one of the biggest things is communication. I try and over communicate. I try and be, available for our staff from a leadership standpoint. That they have access to ask questions about why decisions were made. And then I think in any organization, if decisions have to get up, whether it has to come to the senior associate level or the deputy level or the AD level to make a decision to go back down to be implemented, creates inefficiencies in an organization. And so what I've tried to do, and I think sometimes a lot of people have success and they can over manage situations. And I know I have done that before in certain situations. And so how can we allow people within our organization and people within my downlines to make decisions and know that I'll support them no matter, we may correct something on the back end, personally, one-to-one, but at the end of the day, they know I'll support them no matter what. And if we're communicating philosophies across the board and they're taking them into implementation, then I know we can be successful.
Appreciate both your insights and perspectives. I know primarily for me, and I will touch on this later when we talk about professional development, but I immediately think about, my time through going through the NCAA leadership development program, primarily with really LI, the Leadership Institute. And there's somewhere where you really hone in and focus on your values and really speaks to who you are and how you lead and really what people represent. So for me, it's integrity, faith, family, discipline, determination, and drive. So whether that be I was working in higher education or pro sports, I've taken that everywhere I've gone. And that's something that's really been the driving force. I have them on my wall. Anyone over the 10 direct reports that I have in Michigan State and all the units I champion, I want that to be a known factor. That's how I'm going to show up, with integrity every single day, not be afraid to talk about my faith. I think that's really important. And have the discipline, and really show that in all the facets of what we do, being former student athletes, and so forth and so on. So those are the pieces that I've never wavered on, but never will, because those are a fundamental principle and part of who I am as an individual. So I appreciate you all bringing your perspectives in those areas of who we are, how we lead. People see and take heed of that every single day. But really thinking about this other piece, man, all of us wear a ton of hats on our campuses, pulled in multiple directions. If you just stretch us like putty, I'm sure all the pieces. I know there was a Hail Mary today for you, Ryan, Marcus, on certain other things that you all are involved in pretty much every single day. You look at your schedule and you're like, man, this is not going to be how it is going to lay out. And so I know we've all got pretty accustomed to that, but really want to lean in here on sport administration. So that has evolved so much with NIL, the transfer portal, all the variations of campus and nuance that once was not. So can you both kind of, whoever wants to take a stab at it first, but just talk about how that's changed the trajectory of how you even show up or think about how you serve or support as a coach, particularly in this, and would love to hear those aspects of what that looks like.
Go ahead, Ryan. You can take that first.
All right. Yeah, I think it's different for every coach. I think where they are in their career, where they are in their comfortability, whether it's with this new conversation of revenue share. So I'll take Rick Barnes, for example. I don't think I or anybody's going to manage Rick Barnes, right? Like, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. He's got more wins than I could ever even dream of. He's won more championships and been more successful as a coach. And so what can I do to be a resource? I think is what I try, what I try and do with him is to be, a sounding board at times. I think what we have to sometimes remember is most of the coaches that we have never had to, have a financial conversation with a student athlete. Or, as you're building a roster, what changes? If you've been a developmental program where you're bringing freshmen onto your campus, if they're any good as a freshman and they're not compensated in a way that they feel like they are valued, they're gone the next year. And so all that time and effort and energy you put into the development side, and then they end up bouncing to a different campus. And so, I think it's my role and my job to be an advocate, but also be a contrarian at times of, hey, have you thought about this way? And not that I'm there to provide, although I will probably over provide my X's and O's feedback at time. But I think he's gotten pretty good at just ignoring that. But I think be there as a sounding board to talk through different situations. And ultimately, really understand where, the vision he has for the program. And then what can I do from an administrative standpoint, working with he and Danny on, executing on ultimately what his vision is. But I think, poking, prodding, asking questions, really getting to the root of what he's trying to do. And then working with the staff members around to ensure that we're accomplishing their goals. But again, I think it's really having to understand that, a lot of our coaches have been in their roles for 10, 15, 20 years. And so them flipping the script and how they operate or taking their core principles and applying it to the new world, how can we help them do that? But then there's some coaches that have been head coaches for 1, 2, 3 years. And they probably built their life goals and their culture on this method that really needs to shift or be, adapted in the new revenue share world. And how can we help them adapt? Because I do think that, is high school, recruiting going to be as important and integral as it was 5 years ago? Or, at times, can you, be able to recruit out of the portal and get depth? And so what's your philosophy going to be? Because you probably need one. Or a blend of the two, and how can we be there to help support them and or find the resources to have them go and hire somebody on staff that can help be that advocate for them.
Yeah, I echo all of those sentiments. I mean, I think our job as sport administrators has changed so drastically, and how we have to approach day-to-day conversations. We're probably approaching conversations of things that even we weren't necessarily trained in per se, as it relates to actually being able to build rosters and have some of those conversations that Ryan was referring to. But I still do believe that, at its core, it's still about being open and honest, about expectations, how you define success, and then ultimately how, as a sport administrator, you position those particular sports and those particular coaches to achieve that success. So while our jobs have certainly shifted and changed a lot in terms of like what's kind of the thing that's keeping us up at night or what's keeping them up at night, certainly it still comes down to the fundamentals of, can we have open, honest dialogue about what success looks like for their particular program? And then how do we make sure that we figure out the roadmap to get there?
Yeah, no, I appreciate both of those perspectives. I think for me personally too, like I think about, my first time being a sport administrator for Bob Brayman, who's a Hall of Fame head coach who just retired not too long ago from Florida State University in the track and field and cross country. Still keep in touch to him to this day. I learned so much from him. I was a spoiled football student athlete, so I never saw what it was like to be dealing with head count sports, or what does that mean with financial aid and all those aspects when you're crunching numbers and pieces of that and what that means. So I learned a lot of those intricate details from him. And that's helped me and as relates to where I am and where I sat overseeing women's basketball a period of time here at Michigan State, and how those differentiating periods of relationship building, culture, community, connectivity, all of those things matter. And I think my time in pro sports really helped me become a better sport administrator as it relates to being able to understand how to see the field, if you will, in various aspects of revenue generation. How do you engage community? How do you turn different aspects of community into revenue? And being able to really tie that into the day-to-day experience as a leader, as a strategic thinker, thought partner, and really building those bonds with those coaches and lifelong relationships. I like what Ryan said. Sometimes being a contrarian, it's good to have a rumble. Brene Brown, one of my favorite books, Dare to Lead. It's important to not be someone who always agrees, but that's why you're there, and that's why our expertise is so important in the variations of errors. And really also serving as a past president of N4A, one of our best sessions every year is sport administration. How do you break in and what it's like? And I remember, I don't know about you all, but I had this high hopes of what sport administration was going to be. And what I learned, it was a lot of challenges and more opportunities to grow from those challenges. And it wasn't all glitz and gold, but I'm grateful for them and how they've leaned into variations of multi-level and layer of sport that we've overseen. So I appreciate you doing
it. Funny point you bring that up. I do think, like, in our business, people think like, I got to get sports supervision. And it's like some big hurdle. And I get it that anything that, you want to do that you haven't done before and get access to it. But it does seem like that has been built up in our industry. And I was the same way. If I got to get it, but it isn't always greener on the other side.
That's right.
That is for sure. I've been checking my grades. I don't know about y'all lately on different aspects of, my wife thinks it's great, but I don't. Mine
not turning gray. I'm just losing it. So like, I like try to keep my fade low now because it was turning gray. Now I'm just losing it altogether.
It was going to be best if this was a podcast with not visuals, but now everybody knows how much better looking I am than you guys now.
Man,
I was going to say, we got to get Ryan's coat, man. That'll take us through more love. All right. Get back on script. All right. So with that too, gentlemen, we talked about it. We touched on it. You and I, all of us, obviously the beast from the east, west, north, south, I'd add as well, given that addendum to house and what we're facing, and really kind of the seismic shifts that our both institution, all of our institutions, everyone, no matter where you sit in this paradigm, and really looking at things. So two-pronged question here, lean in with Ryan first, but really just obviously with house, and obviously everyone was dialed in on April 7th, the day of the national championship for the Final Four game and leading up to that. And so we're all waiting, leaning forward, and then we get what we get. So how have you all what have you done as a department to kind of keep folks connected on these ever evolving changes that we face daily, and kind of what's been some of the most difficult parts in that to kind of keep people engaged and connected throughout the mission of that? But just curious on how you all are handling that at both your institutions and really looking at it, from when things don't go the exact way we want them to go. How is that being dealt with too?
Yeah, I'll give some insight into what we've done. And I think Marcus said it earlier, is at the end of the day, we can all make house into something that is changing our world forever, which it is, but we still are doing the core principles that we've always done. And I think if you keep that in the root of your decision making, that's really important in what we've tried to do on our campus. The other piece is we have tried to update our staff and our coaches practically, but not, and intentionally, but more periodically. Let them continue to coach, let them continue to recruit. And then up until like the past 6 months, we've probably been had more open dialogue, but let us figure out what's going on with house, what's going to be implemented, how does it impact you? And then we'll come to you with that information, versus every time you see Pete or Ross put something out, or you get a text thread from the SEC head coaches in your group, like, feel free to send it along. We'll get you a response. We'll get you feedback, but we're not going to sit down and update you of every twist and turn, because coaches are type A personalities, and they're going to, react to that one jolt and figure out, how do they. And so we've tried to keep them updated and informed, but not try and take them off kilter or focus on winning. And then as we have learned more information, we've taken it to them and built a plan with them to help them be successful. And I'd say the challenge is when to communicate, how to communicate to not create just complete turmoil and questions, but also for them, not only the coaches, but your staff. You got entry level folks on your staff that read stuff out of, Dellinger puts something out, they read it and think that are they going to have jobs tomorrow? And so I think it's being able to provide confidence with enough information. And then I'd say the biggest challenge right now is where these roster limits go, and how, we've had coaches making offers. The signing period was 6 months ago. Kids are planning to come to campus this summer to begin training and for all sports, and to not have any clarity or finality to that's challenging. But I also know that, the legal teams on both sides, there's a lot of things to work through.
Yeah, I echo a lot of that. What we try to do here at OU is kind of, as I mentioned, stay as proactive as we can in those discussions, but not get too far out where we have to retract a lot of things that we're saying. So even in our discussions, being very clear that it is a fluid situation, it is dynamic and it is changing constantly. Even dating back in the fall of 24, we were having sit down individual meetings right after kind of the first preliminary hearing happened, kind of in the summer, early fall, and going through, we had a one-on-one individual meeting with every head coach, talk to them about kind of where we saw them at roster wise, what we were going to be able to do with a new world from a scholarship perspective. And if they were a sport that might be subject to some revenue share, we were sitting down and having those conversations as well. And so we had those back in the fall, and the world has continued to evolve and has continued to change. And we've had to have some additional conversations with some coaches where maybe some things have changed a little bit, and we've had to be very open and honest. They're not always easy. As a matter of fact, at times they're very challenging and very difficult when you have to go back and have a conversation with the coach with something that's changed. But you got to be humble. You got to be real. You got to be open, and continue to let them know that this is an ever-changing, fluid situation. And I think kind of the most challenging thing, and it's kind of how we're all talking about this. I've heard this saying of like living in this maybe world, where they say like a yes is good, a no is bad, a maybe is worse. And right now we're just all living in this maybe world where it's like, well, maybe it's going to be this, maybe it's going to be that. I generally believe that most people can take information, even if it's difficult information, if you're able to give them the information, and that's what it is. So even if you have to say, no, we can't do this, or even when you're delivering good information, yes, we're going to be able to do this. But I think, constantly kind of living in this world of change and this world of maybe is making this a challenge. The only thing that I think keeps me somewhat sane is that I know that you two are dealing with it too. Everybody in our league is dealing with it. So like anytime I hear from my coach, when they tell me that all their buddies at Tennessee, all their buddies at Michigan State have figured this all out, and their sport is way ahead of us, I know that's not true, because I'm probably could text one of you guys and find that out very quickly that they dealing with the same thing as us.
Man, if we had the receipts to show those aspects of really delineation of actually being true to that, right? Of what you just said, spend a lot of time doing that too, Marcus, as well, to make sure we're mitigating and really pushing that out. I think one thing I'll shed a light on, to not belabor the conversation, but for us, it's just, obviously we're talking about this daily, but I'm grateful a small group of us get together every Wednesday and just talk about it and just lay it out, of what and how it's going to impact everything. We're not just thinking about those aspects that we all know, kind of those three buckets, but how's it our head count, our staffing, all the pieces in the department that we have to prepare for. Obviously being very clear about, where we are from a financial and fiduciary standpoint of what can and cannot be done, or what we've done in the past will be the maybe world we're living in, which is so true around that piece. And so I'm just grateful that what I do know is I remain hopeful and optimistic once this pieces are rolled out and figured out, or whatever they're going to be, that we are going to be better for it, and we'll have the systems, and I know leaders like yourselves and us will be prepared at what this next iteration is going to look like and what college athletics will become, which I know we're all excited about to an extent, and know the best is yet to come once more guardrails and opportunities are put in place for us to be successful. So more to come there. But one thing we do know with this times and opportunities and the proliferation of assets and resources and collateral, we have to think outside the box and thinking about different rev streams and opportunities that are thinking about how you've kind of implemented those on your campus. And both of you have alluded to it already throughout the course of this conversation around what that's looked like, what it feels like. I'll just give 2 examples that we've done in Michigan State. One of the things I'm really grateful for is where I sit. I'm able to try things and fail fast and do it in a way where there's no judgment. It's just looking at for the right opportunity to strike, because we all know any and all good deals, if you have strategy and opportunity and implementation, it can work. And so 2 of the things I want to highlight from an example, and then I would love to hear from you both, as we launched a program, an initiative last year called Spartan Iron. Spartan Iron is this competition style, 40-yard dash, 3-cone, all these vertical jumps. Put yourself back in the form of a student athlete. We had a price point in our area where we benchmarked various opportunities and to leverage this as a revenue stream for our department to grow our competitive excellence fund. And so with that, had a very outpouring of support in the community, and it was an awesome launch, and it really got some community partners involved to help us really think outside the box of how we make this better even next year. And then coupled with that, we had an event called Community Sweat, which we invited the community out in our stadium and really charged to do yoga, bar, and some other activities in Spartan Stadium, which the community, obviously the communities we serve, love our teams and are ingrained in who we are and our facilities and all those pieces. So both of those events were huge successes, and it was an outside the box revenue opportunity for us, not to just go to the same donors and the same kind of pieces of what that looks like, which we know donor fatigue, no matter where you sit, particularly in this day and age, is strong. And so it's those types of initiatives. I'm already thinking about oversee our nutrition area. What would it look like to have our own version of Spartan Chef, and have a celebrity cook and different things of just thinking outside the box. Although we may have to pay an athlete to be there, that with their name, image, likeness and pieces, but keeping those ideas on the back burner of what can generate revenue, and how we can think outside the box to bring different revenue streams to our campuses. So I'd love to hear from you both on what do those look like at Tennessee and Oklahoma.
Marcus, I'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah. So, I think, for us, I think the first thing I think we all don't need to lose sight of is still, are you doing a really good job at the core things that still drive the most revenue? Right. So we still want to make sure that we're spending a lot of time on, are we strategically pricing our tickets? Are we strategically marketing, our ticket sales? Are we, do we have great, programs, and are we adding a lot of value, to what we're providing for our donors so that we're able to maximize that all important philanthropic support? And so I want to be clear that we got to make sure that we don't lose sight of those things. With that being said, every day we have a RevGen group, and we're talking about, outside of the box or different things maybe that we haven't been as, strategic in maybe in the past. And I think, mostly for us is really talking about, how can we maximize some of our facility usage, on non-game days. And so we've been trying to be very strategic about bringing in a staff, maybe even have some conversations. Is that something that we want to get professionally managed, outside of athletics? I think so many times, those are things that we haven't done. And you look at, whether it's professional teams or professional facilities, those are managed by third-party professional companies. So we've had some of those conversations to see if any of that makes sense. And then to think about kind of our partnership with Learfield, we've locked our arms with them, and had some very open and honest dialogue about how we drive revenue, how we have brand awareness, and doing some things that, maybe traditionally a school like Oklahoma, or maybe some schools in our conference haven't really done. But everything is kind of with that lens on, how can we drive revenue? How can we be innovative? So those are just a couple of things that we've been talking about. I think the biggest thing is making sure that we don't lose sight of what is our core functions and the things that are still going to drive a lot of the revenue. And then how can we add a talent fee like Tennessee did?
Yeah, I mean, I think Marcus hit the nail on the head. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be great at your core competencies, right? Like your tickets and donation have to be great at those. And so and marketing did this probably 20 years ago, and they created these, marketing or external pods, and they would be talking about what program they were going to run or what initiative they were going to have for that week's game. So we've taken that and created revenue pods or subsets of football. And so that group meets weekly. How can, where does, we call it, a little bit, lack of a better term, like where's the meat on the bone? So if we have our overall total revenue in comparison, Texas, Michigan, how do we get in that top three? How do we get in the top, what can we do to become the number one revenue department in the country? And then what sectors? So where do they rank in comparison to our peers? Where is basketball? Where is baseball? We have that for every sport, price points. And then we hired an internal data analytics team, and that individual runs those groups, particularly related to football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, that have, significant revenue tied to them. And then, Marcus mentioned it, Learfield. We did the, pilot, Neyland Stadium preserved by pilot. What assets, and each category they have, what categories are being maximized, which ones are trailing behind, what schools are, $30-35 million plus in revenue sales, from a sponsorship standpoint, where are we and how do we get there? But you can talk about those things, but what are you going to do to build a pathway for each one of those revenue streams? Bigger schools, it wasn't so much a revenue stream when I was at, FAU or other places, but, our licensing, when I think on gross revenue, for licensing, which we don't get obviously the gross, but I think we hit $67 million. We're the number one school in CLC. That's north of $12 million. Like that becomes a significant, that's like our third most profitable revenue or team. And so how can we focus on those elements of the business? Then everybody's talking about doing concerts in the stadium, and, we do a significant amount of business out of our Food City Center. And those are great, and we need to continue to grow those. But the core businesses, like Marcus mentioned, your philanthropic, your major gift team, what sort of metrics do you have? Are you tracking them? Are they hitting them? But that needs to be really for every sport. And creating, I think, a revenue model and an evaluation tool to know where you are today. Where do you ultimately want to go? Like when we got here, our fans expected us, why aren't you beating Alabama? Why aren't you beating Georgia? Why aren't you beating Florida? And it's like, well, we're charging 40% less than they're charging to be able to give our teams the resources they need to compete. So we've got to get our revenues up to be able, I say the financial resources and winning have always been tied together, but they're tied together now more than ever before. And so you've got to maximize each of your revenue streams to give your program and your athletic department a chance to win.
Yeah, well, appreciate really both of you in terms of ensuring that we keep our house in order. The core competencies of what we do are essential to continue to keep the drive and the abilities and necessaries to move things forward. I know I'm hating this, fellas, but we're coming to a close here in this conversation. But I want to make sure we give a shout out and pay homage to the individuals and the people who have really. And this is where we get ourselves in trouble, right? This particular question of who is the person, people who really, in your career left an indelible mark. And really, maybe it was something as it relates to, athletics, personally, professionally, stick with you. But I'll get myself in trouble first and say that there's so many people who've helped me along my journey, and I wouldn't be where I am or be on this call without them. But for whatever reason, this individual continues to pop up when I was thinking about this question and giving it to you all. And I want to give a major shout out to Dr. James Clements, who's the president of Clemson University. And so his mentorship, I was back when I came through the ranks of academic support, student development, that world of internal, and having the ability to see someone in action who was really passionate about athletics. President Clements was always someone who really spoke and connected with me even when I was an academic advisor. And it's funny, I worked at Clemson over a decade plus, and we still keep in contact, and we reconnected throughout my time through the NCAA Pathway Program. And he has continued to be a driving force for me and many others in the higher education space. He's an innovator. He's a leader. But most importantly, he's someone who I can call a friend and pick his brain of how presidents or universities are thinking about different aspects of our world and how do we change our vernacular and really think about ways in which to communicate and socialize messaging, which he's helped me with immensely. So President Clemens, I thank you, man, for your fire, your passion for this higher education, reminding us we still work in higher ed, as you tell me often. And so I'm grateful to use that platform. So Ryan, Marcus, now that I'm in trouble with every other mentor, sponsor, folks, would love for you to join me once you name your folks or your person or whoever that is in your lives.
Good, Ryan, you want to go first again?
I'll do it quickly. I mentioned him earlier, but I think, it's always been I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for great people that have invested in me, both personally and professionally. I took a leap of faith when I left the University of South Carolina and took a full-time job at the University of Memphis where I knew nobody at all. A year into that role, Ren Baker became the AD. 6 years later, we go to the University of Missouri together, where I'm the overseeing major gifts, working for Brian White. Brian ultimately hired me there, but ultimately working for Ren and the people I met along the pathway that he helped introduce me to. One is Will Reese, which brings us here today through Cal's, and then ultimately working for Brian, going to FAU, ultimately leading me to this opportunity to work for Danny in Tennessee. But Ren, and I think the most important part is the development folks out there that had our nose in the air, that you had to go through the development route to be an AD. Ren came in as a small school AD and taught me a lot about, it isn't about, where you came up from or what you learned. Everybody has an opportunity to lead and everybody can champion that cause. And in the beginning, he was FCSAD that then came to Memphis, and I learned a ton that you don't have to come from one pathway, and that if you dive in and learn things together and work together and are great to people. I mean, I ended up living with his family at two different places as I was moving in, although he did make me bring in all the boxes and put together all the things for his children. But introduced me to folks along the way that have poured into me, and I know I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that entire group of folks. And I too am leaving folks out, but it started there, and then it led me to a great network that they will let me know that I am here because of them too.
Yeah, I'm sure all of those individuals are very proud of both of you guys, man. And I think so many times we think about the people that helped us get to where we are, and maybe don't talk about the people that are, right across the aisle from us, and two individuals like you guys self that I admire and I watch what you guys have been doing, and so grateful to be able to call you guys colleagues and friends. And the list can go on and on. I mean, I've been so blessed and fortunate to work for so many great athletic directors, but great university presidents and chancellors, and for me, anytime I get asked this question, it just kind of helps me not get in trouble with as many people as possible, as I just start with the beginning. And I started with the person who really gave me my first shot, who actually was not my boss, but a lady named Donna Sam, who was at the time one of our deputy ADs at the University of Pittsburgh and the SWA. And as you guys both know, I was a student athlete at Pitt, had an unbelievable 4 years there playing basketball. And the summer between my junior and senior year, I started to get this itch of wanting to work in sports. And particularly as I studied kind of the sports business, I realized that it was much, much bigger than what you maybe saw on Saturdays in the fall or what you may see during the week in any other event. There's a lot more that went behind the scenes. And so I spent a lot of time kind of meeting with some people in the athletic department at Pitt during my entire senior year. And Donna was one of the ones that was very welcoming and accommodating to me throughout her schedule to be able to meet with me and spend some time and kind of just teach me all about what college athletics was. And then fast forward all the way to the end of my senior year, I actually was offered and accepted a job to go work at a local bank at PNC Bank as a finance major. And Donna sent me an email one day. I got a random email from her. I was with my then girlfriend, now wife, at the time, overseas in Europe right after we graduated from college. I got an email from Donna and said, "Hey, this position just opened up in our business office. I know you've been thinking about working in college athletics. Would you be interested in it?" And so I said, absolutely. I was like, I only got two problems. One, I'm overseas in Europe. And two, I start a job at a bank in about 4 weeks. And she said, well, I think when you get back, you probably need to reach out to this person. And so she opened that door for me. Ultimately, is all of our responsibilities when somebody opens the door for you to literally walk through it. But she's heard me tell this story several times. And every time I tell it, she always texts me and says, stop doing that. You did this all on your own. But Donna, when this comes out, I'm going to send this to you and just tell you once again, thank you for everything that you've done for me.
No, I think we all can agree. And I appreciate you all sharing that we can dedicate a whole segment to the people who've helped us get to where we are today. And I think it's funny now that you've shifted into the roles we have where people are saying that about us respectfully. And the calls, the texts, the things you receive based on just talked to a mentee this week who's making a shift to an opportunity, and just to see them in the leadership capacities and the roles that we've been able to do would not happen without those folks. So since Ryan got me in trouble, thank you, Mark Hollis. Thank you, D-Rad. Thank you, Stan Wilcox. And thank you, Randy Spetman, for all you do for and have done for Mr. Henderson. So with that being said, we'll transition to our last question of the day. And really, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Again, just a reminder for those who've tuned in late, you are listening to the lobby segment of the Cows Report. And it's been a joy to talk with Ryan and Marcus and have this candid conversation and real-time dialogue with you all. But we've talked about it, but really talk about professional development in spaces where you are, and what are some of the things that have been instrumental or integral into your growth and development. Obviously, none of us would be here without Cows and have not met each other at those intentional conversations where we've been able to connect in the lobby, no pun intended, but also different spaces and places that we reside. So, Marcus, you want to lead us off on any professional development or pieces that you appreciate and also that you manage up, down, across to ensure your team are getting involved in as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a firm believer in, a lot of these programs that a lot of us have done. So whether that was, attending Cows, I went through SMI, I went through the Pathways program, and those things taught me a lot about understanding myself, understanding values, having a greater understanding of college athletics and what it entails. It introduces you to, as you aspire, it might introduce you to search firms. It might introduce you to university presidents and chancellors and other athletic directors that you might aspire to be. And I think those things are critically important. But one thing that I would add, and I kind of touched on it when I was talking about you two, I think so many times we get focused on and enamored with trying to connect with people that are in positions that we want to be at, or connecting with people that are positions that we aspire to be. And like I said, I think that that's great. But what I always encourage, younger folks or folks that are just maybe getting into the business or growing, is make sure you get to know your colleagues that are at your level and that are across the aisle. Because for a lot of reasons, I mean, obviously I could probably go on and on about, maybe some of the business ideas that we exchange. I mean, Ryan and I, we exchange so many different business ideas, but I think it's just critically important for you to have other individuals that are going through what you're going through, and people that you can lean on and that you can text, you can call, maybe when you're having a tough day, maybe you're looking for some advice on how to deal with a particular situation with a coach, or how to manage up or how to manage down. And so to me, and then those are also individuals that candidly, as you grow and as you're looking for opportunities to be a senior leader at a place, they're usually calling somebody that maybe knows you. They're not just always calling the athletic director. So to me, I always encourage people to make sure that they spend time, having a network of individuals that are growing in the industry and growing in the business, just as themselves. So I think that that's critically important as it relates to professional development.
Yeah, I think Marcus hit the nail on the head. I think value-based leadership training is crucial. And Cal's has started a program where they do an on-campus event, Cal's One Day. And we programmed it out with Will of leaders, from the region. But a lot of the leaders that spoke on these panels were coming from our campus and our current day department heads. And the amount of feedback that we received from all the way through our staff, top to bottom, that was, the best leadership training, the most exposure. So we have tried to, we always talk about building your bench on your campus and how can you have great talent. So if somebody does leave or, it's next person up. And I think what we have really been focused on is how can we create those cross aisle conversations. We've got some really talented folks on our staff that are leading that of how can we create Cal's or NACDA for Tennessee. And also bring in people like our Brady Hart, who's our head of development, deputy athletic director. He does a great job of bringing speakers in to his staff once a month, where it's across the aisle professional like Mark is coming in doing a Zoom and talking about their career, what they've done in their career, what they've accomplished, what were their paths, what other leadership trainings do they do, and so learning from each other within your department, I think. We don't do enough of that. It's about, hey, I need to call Joe C and figure out his pathway. Well, Joe's path is very, none of us can go replicate that now. So who can we talk to that's going through some of the things that we're going through? How can we learn from them? And a lot of times that person is on your campus, or that person on your campus can connect you with somebody at another campus. And I think as you progress in your career, I know like my wife has enjoyed meeting Marcus's wife at SEC meetings and knowing that, as much as we're going through this, spouses also go through it at times, and the challenges that we face and being able to connect with one another. I think that helps you as much professionally as much as it does personally. And as of recent, I think we get inundated with our athletics professional development. For me, just one, I listened to How I Built This on NPR, Guy Raz, who goes and interviews CEOs from other companies, their little 35 or 40-minute segments. And sometimes I'll pick companies that I know of and just listen to their stories, how they created the company, what sort of things they did, the challenges that they met along the way and how they overcame them. And then like to be able to share some of that back with our staff at times. Because I think we get so inundated with our industry, and here's, the D1 ticker this, or here's this move that's going on here, versus a lot of our challenges are just, we tie them to the logos and the helmets, versus, the real world and the real, business is also facing some similarities, and how can we bring those business practices to our campuses?
Yeah, I love what you both said about, the peer-to-peer, and I've been very intentional about doing that more as of late, going through these programs. As you mentioned, Ryan, the value-based leadership and initiatives that we've been very, very fortunate to lean into. But what I've gleaned from that is these relationships. And so really fertilizing and really pouring into the next generation of leaders, which is us. And I'm grateful to call you both friends, colleagues. Respect the heck out of you, even though you're in the SEC. We'll leave it at that. But no, seriously, though, really have the utmost respect for you both. Thoroughly have enjoyed this time together today. Learned a great deal about the Sons of South Carolina, I can tell you that, and really taking it to another level. But thank you both for being who you are. Thank you for leading the way you do. And thank you for the opportunity to pour back into our listeners who will listen to this lobby conversation on the Cal's Report. So appreciate you both, and thank you all for tuning in today.
Thanks for joining us for episode 9 of the Cal's Report. We're grateful to Arizona AD Desiree Reed-Francois for an honest, powerful, big interview. From navigating change and building trust to her why that drives it all. Her leadership is a reminder of the impact values-based decision-making can have, even in the most complex times. And a big thank you to Ashton, Ryan, and Marcus for a standout lobby segment. Diving into real-world strategies, shared challenges, and the mindset it takes to lead in the evolving world of college athletics. To our guests and to each of you listening, thanks for being part of the CALS community. Your work matters, your leadership matters, and we're honored to walk alongside you on this journey. Make sure you're subscribed to the CALS Report on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at the CALS Report and Twitter at 80 Symposium for more insights, updates, and behind-the-scenes content. To learn more about CALS or to connect with our team, visit www.80symposium.us. I'm Will Reese. Thanks for listening to the CALS Report. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep leading the way in college athletics.